You're late.
Please don't say that.
Yeah, I'm late with this video, but now you've had lots of time to catch up with the show, so spoilers are ahead.
For the 20 or so people who will watch this.
Loki has always been one of my favorite MCU characters, the recurring villain who gave the heroes their greatest threat and caused the formation of the Avengers, and in a universe of heavy hitters like his brother Thor, the Hulk, and other villains who were generally providing a physical threat to the heroes for one movie, Loki continually returned to plague them with schemes for 3 films until he was, no offense to people who enjoyed the movie, turned into a complete joke in Thor Ragnarok. Which isn't a surprise considering how Taika Waititi seems to view these characters, but then he sort of got redeemed by the Russos with an ironic death at the hands of the very person who helped him attack New York. And I thought that was the last we'd see of him. Then later, there was the rather surprising announcement of him getting his own series despite his death, and all I wanted was a serious take on the character once again. And from the first episode, I was not disappointed. For me, there was always one scene that established just how much of a threat Loki was. I know it's almost nobody's favorite MCU movie, but in Thor the Dark World, when Kurse is causing havoc by breaking all the prisoners out of their cells and chopping down guards like it's no one's business, he approaches Loki's cell, and there's a long look between them, Loki seeming completely unperturbed. Finally, Kurse just walks away, knowing that the last thing he should do is let this guy out of his cage. Say what you like about this movie, that scene was a brilliant way of not letting a new threat eclipse what Loki had been up to that point, an Avengers-level threat, and made him seem like something beyond most villains. Well, the Loki series almost seems to take that moment and turn it into a basis to rebuild the character. They begin by making fun of him, something we've all gotten used to by now, even recapping jokes like dropping him. And for the first while, he gets bullied around by yet another, most powerful group in the multiverse. Then at around 20 minutes in, this happened.
Okay, come have a seat.
And I thought maybe they'd remembered who he used to be. Then 10 minutes later...
Okay, Loki, I think we can finish up tomorrow and just pick it up. Mischievous scam.
Suddenly, Loki is moving freely around, gaining information and outsmarting his captors, only returning to his cell when he's ready. And suddenly, it began to feel that the TVA were the ones who had bitten off more than they could chew. Add to that the revelation that Loki was also the villain being hunted by Mobius, and in one episode, Loki's base as a competent, deadly trickster villain had been completely rebuilt. And without that rebuilding process, the revelation that their enemy was a Loki would have had no impact. The few people who follow this channel know I love getting into the weeds of philosophy and theme, but that can be a tricky game if the theme is only implied by the piece in question rather than openly discussed. So naturally, I was thrilled when, in episode 2, Loki and Mobius discussed free will and perception of existence. This scene identifies the differences between the characters and sets up a fundamental question: who will change whom? While also teasing us with whether Loki is only a trickster, like the TVA says, or whether he's capable of being something else. I loved how the TVA soldiers who have a glimpse of their memory immediately reverted from thugs back into empathetic people. It really helps sell the theme that every life has meaning and potential, and forcing everyone to conform to one single timeline takes away more than it gives. One thing I would like to guess at in passing is if the scene where Hunter B-15 asks Sylvie to show her past life and says,
I looked happy.
might be an homage to one of the last scenes from Blade Runner, and a symbol for variants lost in the alternate timelines.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
But that's very speculative on my part. I like that during their investigation, the characters have balance. Loki does bring his fresh eyes to an old case, but Mobius brings his professionalism and experience. Shows like this hinge on chemistry, and who would have thought that Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson would be a great buddy cop combo? And I really missed that dynamic in episode 3. Overall, that episode really slowed the pace for me. It's the one where they're on the moon and escape from the train and has a very apocalyptic atmosphere. I got that the show needed Loki and Sylvie to work together, and these extreme circumstances are a good way to do it, but while it was happening, it just felt very obligatory. Nevertheless, there was still some snappy dialogue, but episode 3 kind of felt like filler to me, especially since I'd gotten invested in the time cop stuff. But I was wrong. It turned out to be the great shift of the show once it achieved what it needed to, establish some kind of camaraderie between Loki and Sylvie, leading to her opening up about her past. It's funny how I knew the TVA were definitely not good guys, but for some reason the revelation of how bad they were had more effect once I saw Sylvie's backstory. Up till then, I simply saw her as a female Loki, one who changed gender at some point thanks to this. And I actually foresaw evil Loki being a female variant. Besides, the show premiered during Pride Month. But when she said that she was born the goddess of mischief, it suddenly reshaped her, not as a female version of the Loki we know, or some kind of appeasement for a sector of the population, but as her own character who, for some reason, had been deemed problematic for the super bureaucracy. By episode 4, a very important shift had come about. The TVA had gone from an almost comically overbearing bureaucracy who might be doing good work, considering who Loki is, to these sort of mooks trying to keep up with two villains, to becoming a major threat, a real antagonist practicing the sort of totalitarian ideology which the Avengers regularly face. And rather ironically, making Loki the one trying to tell the truth, and creating a crisis for Mobius, who wonders about where his loyalties should lie. The adventures at the end of time were very inventive. It's great to see some real high fantasy. It's one thing to say that there are more variants of Loki than anyone else, but it feels a lot more real when stuff like this happens.
You're telling me that thing's a Loki too?
Oh, yes.
And Richard Grant as classic Loki was so satisfying. I loved how they did his classic costume without making it look lame, and he basically stole the whole episode. One thing about a sprawling epic like this, with characters jumping to different places and times and infinity stones being powerless paperweights, it can be hard to juggle all the implications, and a frequent complaint I've come across is that the infinity stones were completely undermined and could never be taken seriously again because the TVA just eclipsed everything we knew. But I beg to differ, simply because it's like saying since aliens attacked New York, there's no sense in telling the story of Captain America taking on the Winter Soldier. Or who needs handguns when you have tanks? So just because this big story of the TVA is here doesn't mean other things are undermined. He Who Remains being charismatic was a great offset to the self-serious TVA, and I loved it. It makes perfect sense for him to be charismatic because, well, he kinda knows everything and seems to like it. I suppose it's understandable people would find him to be anticlimactic, but this is the kind of villain that we'd applaud on paper. He doesn't fit any of the evil overlord stereotypes because, like a real person, he's self-aware and the hero from his perspective. I can't wait to see Jonathan Majors playing variants of what we've seen here, especially when one of them will be a version of Kang, an absolute classic Avengers villain. I was very happy with what they did with Sylvie. Accomplishing her goal of stabbing the heart of the TVA was welcome because I'm not sure how plausible it would be after so long for anyone to be able to talk her out of it. I mean, think about it.
Think, Mark!
And as for the ending, after seeing how he grew, rebelled, and came full circle to think that perhaps the existence of the TVA was somewhat justified, only to be trapped again was so Kafkaesque and Orwellian at the same time. The villain had become a hero, and ultimately a prisoner, of an ultimately unescapable bureaucracy. And at the same time, giving us some poetry that Loki ushered in the big villain last time, and he seems to have done it again.
You were born to cause pain and suffering and death.
There was one lazy thing for me. That being Renslayer's exit, it just felt contrived, especially for a character I really enjoyed hating / trying to understand, but, well, otherwise it was a good scene. I could sit here and speculate all day about Season 2, but considering all the things slated for release in the meantime, most importantly, the appearance of Kang in the next Ant-Man movie, by the time Season 2 comes around, there will probably have been major changes to Loki's situation and the multiverse at large, so I'm just gonna wait for it. In the end, I think Loki was exactly what the MCU needed. The amount of work put into the world, the characters, and the ties to upcoming stories made it feel significant, and there's no going back from it, which is the kind of daring that keeps series alive and growing. But this is all just my opinion. Let me know your thoughts and speculations in the comments, leave a like and all that good stuff to help with the omniscient YouTube algorithm before my channel gets pruned. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.